Rob, thank you for joining me. So I'm going to jump right into it. You've written a book called Profit Sharing. I read it. I really liked it. It's short, and we're going to get to that. First, though, can you tell me what led to you eventually writing this book and taking this approach?
Absolutely. So I lost my job during the 2008-09 housing recession aftermath. I was a commercial superintendent for a guy here in San Jose, and I found myself as an unplanned business owner with my wife. We had our second child on the way. She was like 6 months pregnant. And so I started working, doing everything I could to pay the bills and put food on the table. And I was successful from day one. Making a profit on my work wasn't an issue. 3 years goes by really fast when you're just trying to hold on to life and hold on to your family and paying bills and getting out of the debt and all the aftermath that I experienced from that housing recession or crash or whatever people call it nowadays. But I look up 3 years later and I have 30 employees. I'm working 60 to 80 hours a week. One of the companies I started in that time was a 24-hour plumbing service company. And I didn't plan that out, working all the weekends and nights, my phone's ringing all hours of the day and night. And so I was looking around and just overwhelmed, overworked. I was unhealthy. I was overweight. I was drinking. I was doing all these typical things I think a lot of people do when they're in a high stress environment. And even if you're profitable, it doesn't mean it's necessarily an enjoyable time or you have balance in your life and you're actually doing things in a healthy, sustainable way. So I went down this journey, what I call a relentless pursuit of self-education. And I started reading books about business, culture, marketing, sales, anything that I could do to improve my operations and my life. And I stumbled across this idea of profit sharing, which is a fascinating idea, right? It's a buzzword. It gets a lot of people's attention. If you're an employee somewhere, you're like, yeah, I want to talk about profit sharing. I want more money or more piece of this pie. And if you're a business owner, I have mixed reactions on the word, but I had this fascinating reaction to it. Like, okay, that's an interesting idea. I want to check it out. I want to pursue it. I want to learn more about it. And so I started looking for more books about it, podcasts, articles, anything I could find. And I found some stuff, but it was all theory. There was no how-to guide. There was no, buy this course and learn how to do it. Or nobody was talking about the nuts and bolts of profit sharing. It was just the ideas and the theory behind it. So that was frustrating for one, but I was determined to figure it out and determined to implement it in my business, at least to try it out to see what I could do. Because I was struggling with what I think most business owners struggle with is nobody thinks, works, or acts like I do, right? We're the boss. We show up every day early and we just feel like we're always pushing or always fighting or always a level of conflict with our employees to get goals done or get projects done or whatever business we're in to get things done. And then they go home and you're left with thinking about the next day or dealing with the problems and the fires from that day or last week. And it's just this never ending cycle of business ownership, what I thought was normal at the time. And so I thought profit sharing was going to be some kind of fix for that. That was my thought, right? And I took two of the leaders that I had at the time. I brought in my office one day and I was like, hey, I have this idea. It's called profit sharing. I don't know how to do it because I can't find anything on how to do it, but I want to sit down with you guys and let's draw up some kind of plan, what you think and what I think and what I've learned, and come up with this profit sharing program. So we did that. They were very motivated to do it, right? Because they were going to get more money if it worked out. And we did, and I cut my first profit sharing check the first quarter of 2015. And there were 7 people in that program. In my book, I talk about the decision makers, the people that actually make decisions every day to drive the profit in the company. They either save costs or make money. And so that at that time in my life, there were 7 people that I considered were the huge drivers, right? Everybody that works at a company are part of the solution, either part of the problem or part of the solution. But there are decision makers that have more weight on making those decisions every day. So I cut 7 profit sharing checks for a quarter, and it was a complete disaster, right? Nobody changed anything they did. I spent, I think it was like $15,000 ish, somewhere in that range, and nothing changed. The behavior didn't change. I didn't see a difference in the way that they thought, worked, or cared about the business like I did. So we went back to the drawing board with those 2 leaders, and we tried some other things and made some more changes, and we communicated a lot more with the team. One of the things that I screwed up was even communicating what profit sharing was supposed to do and what the goals were of the program to do. So people kind of just got this check almost out of nowhere. And so if they don't know what it's for, how am I supposed to expect them to react to it a certain way, right? So all these little things that I've learned. Anyway, fast forward, it took about 3 years of trial and error. And there were some wins along the way. I don't want to make it sound like it was a total dud for 3 years, but we saw some light at the end of the tunnel, a little more every time and a little bit brighter and a little bit closer. But in 2018, we really struck on some ideas that started to work and change my mindset of my employees. And I truly believe this when I say that, turning them from an employee to a team member. And, we hear that word team member a lot, and I like it because you're part of a team, right? It creates that teamwork, that unity of a group of people that are all striving for the same goal, right? Just like in sports, you have a football team, right? You don't have coach and employees, right? So, and I started to see a huge shift into what people were thinking about, a shift in what their daily activities that they were doing, per the minute to help the company win, to help make themselves better. And as a result of that, the company's success skyrocketed, right? We were experiencing tremendous growth. Profits were going up. Morale was up. Culture was better. And I just was riding this wave of, okay, this is working. Let's keep doing it. Let's try some other things and keep fine tuning this whole thing. And so that kind of success gets a lot of attention. It got a lot of attention from my competitors, my friends, my customers. So people started asking me, hey, what are you doing, right? You started in 2010 in your garage with one guy, right? And then now it's 2022 and you have 100 employees, multiple businesses in different industries, and they're all very, very successful. We want to talk to Rob about what he's doing. And so I tell him all these things about leadership. During that time, I doubled down a lot in leadership conferences and traveled to different trade shows to speak to other business owners. It just really poured into myself and my other leaders. I'd bring them along too. We started doing our own leadership training. So we really doubled down on leadership. But this profit sharing thing was kind of the driving force of people realizing, hey, if we learn and got better, we could make more money. The company makes more money. It's a win-win. And they really dove in to absorb that stuff that we were offering that I was chasing at. So I got a lot of questions about what I was doing. I was happy to share and help other business owners and tell them about profit sharing. And the questions get deeper and more detailed. And so I would had business owners say, come on over for an hour and, we'll have lunch and I'll walk you through exactly what I'm doing. Those meetings started to pile up. And I was like, man, this is taking up a lot of my time. I still have these businesses to run. I'm still a father and a husband. And somebody suggested to me that maybe I should write it down. And that's the truth about where the book came from. So I was like, oh, okay, like I could write it down, but what if I wrote a book about kind of the whole story and where I came from and how I got to this point? So that's what the book that you read is about. In there, I wrote the 10 rules of profit sharing, which were all lessons and mistakes that I made that I learned from to have a really cohesive program that actually does what it's supposed to do. And that brings me to talking to Eric and hanging out with you guys.
Well, thank you. So I don't know if you said this explicitly. I may have just missed it, but you said something about as an owner, you're going home at night and you're thinking about or you're worrying about the next thing and how to make the next sale or payroll or something along those lines is what you said. And I don't know if you stated it explicitly that what you were looking for when you came upon profit sharing was how to get your employees to think more like team members, which then you got to. Was that your initial motivation, was trying to get more buy-in and participation?
Yeah, one of the big motivator was, as a business owner, it's awfully a lonely existence, right? You feel like you're the only one that really cares. You're showing up first, you're leaving last. Like I used to have to make sure the doors were locked, right? Because nobody else would lock the doors because Rob was always going to lock the doors on his way out, right? And you miss a lot of family dinners when you have to leave work at 7:30 at night, right? And I was frustrated by this fact that, it's not just my income that goes away or gets hurt if we get robbed and all our tools are stolen out of the shop, or if something bad happens and we flood the building out. There's other people's income that's affected by this, right? They have jobs here. These are good market competitive wage jobs. Like I always feel proud of the fact that we were at the top end of that spectrum, right? I'm not saying we paid the most, but like people wanted to work for us. We paid well. We cared about our people. And so, but there is a gap between them understanding that and having that buy-in to the company's success, right? I mean, just think about all the people we know that have jobs. You go to a barbecue with your buddies, half of them or more, probably more, are complaining about their jobs, right? It's a common topic of conversation that comes up in every family or friend gathering, at church, or birthday parties, or whatever we're doing. People complain about their work. And I just hated that. That was the culture that I came from my previous employer. There was so much negativity and so much complaining. It's like, man, we're here 8, 9, 10 hours a day, not counting the commute time and getting ready at home to get here. And we hate it. And how do we fix that? How do we not spend more than a third of our life somewhere that we just dread or complain about all the time? So profit sharing, and I think a lot of those complaints comes from this boss that's cracking the whip, that's, shoving an agenda down your throat, shoving goals into your face and pushing you to do these things. And maybe you're not bought in. There's no reward for you to actually do these things except keeping your job. So we fall to this level of doing what we have to do just to keep our job, just to not get fired, right? And what kind of boring existence is that, of just doing things to not lose our job and having to go through the process of finding another one and brushing up our resumes? Like, just, that's what their motivation factor was. How about we created an environment where if you throw the ball and I catch it better than the next guy, we're going to win more games. We're going to win more days. We're going to win more profit. And then we'll share that, because that's what it takes. It takes a team. I can't do anything by myself. Seems like the bigger I get, the more help I need. And that's the whole idea, the whole encompassing thing about the employee versus team member.
I'm going to step aside a little bit perhaps from profit sharing, but this just stuck out so much in your book. So I wanted to comment on it. You said there a minute ago something about, if we get robbed, if our tools get stolen or whatever, or I don't know that you said this, but I think it goes along with it. If you don't make the next sale, it's not just your job or your income. And one of the things that I think you described as being sort of a transformational moment for you in the book, and I hope I'm not giving too much of the book away if I reference things like this, was you got down to do like some trim work or something with one of your employees, and he was kind of like, "What are you doing?" And you're like, "I'm going to help you." Right. And he said more or less, "I can do this job. I'm relying upon you to find the next job for me to be able to do." Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So that was in the early days. Like, I think months after losing my job, I got this really big house remodel project. And, it was excited. It was several $100,000, biggest amount of money I've ever seen in my life, probably the biggest amount of money most of my family members have ever seen in their life. And this was the job I felt like was going to make or break me if, getting through this recession that we were in. Because you got to remember back then, you put an ad out, some people may have never heard of Craigslist now, but I know you have, Eric. You got enough gray hairs just like I do in my beard. But you put an ad out on Craigslist for carpenters or plumbers or electricians, you would get tens, 20, 30 responses that day, right? So the trades market was really, really tough for jobs. And so I got this job and I was super hyper focused on it, going super well and making all the money out of it as possible and doing a really good job. And, I just thought this was going to be, I needed this money to launch the company, to find the next one. Right. And it's a true story. I was there every day, right? I ordered all the materials. I got all the guys lined up and the subs that we needed. And it was a lot. We were doing decks, kitchens, flooring, painting inside and out, this really nice house. And I lay down next to Eric one day and I'm going to help him do this. It was a fancy soundproofing floor for this bedroom that the lady wanted to put her piano in. She was a big piano teacher at a university here in town. And so it was this really fancy, very expensive flooring, and I was going to help him do it. I wanted to make sure it went down right and all this stuff. And like I say in the book, like you just mentioned, I have my bags on, right? I would work too. And I think it was 25 years old. And he looks at me and he goes, "What are you doing?" Right? Because if you're here working, who's out estimating and selling for the next job? And I can't remember if I put this in the book too, but he basically said, "I have a family too. And I need to work the day after this job is done. Like I still need to work." And I didn't think about that, right? I was thinking about the 20% of net profit that I was going to make on this job and how far that was going to take my family, right? I'm like, okay, that's like 4 months of rent, groceries, all hammered. So that I'm good for like 4 months and I will find another job and I'll kind of continue on. I wasn't thinking about this continuing taking care of the team members and what their needs were and having everybody prosper in the organization at that time, right? Obviously, my mindset has changed dramatically since then, but this is probably, like you said, a big pivotal moment where, oh, this guy's got bills too. This guy is motivated to make money also, right? And literally he said that and it was huge. I left. I was like, "You can run this job. You can check on all these guys, right? I got it, boss." I went home. I put on a pair of Dockers. My wife and I literally designed a business card and printed it out on regular printer paper, not even cardstock. And we sat there and cut out the business cards. And by 11 a.m. that day, I was knocking on doors trying to get the next job. And we did. We got another job. And then we got another job. And we've done millions of dollars of jobs since then. So yeah, huge moment and a huge shift in mindset for my team members. That guy's still with me, by the way.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm going to guess that whatever the journey has been, not just for you, but also your several businesses, that as a result of, thinking that, because a lot of us, when you're sort of divorced from, not necessarily that there's separation between you and the boss in terms of space, physical space, but you're just divorced from the mindset of the boss, that, you either don't think about something like that or you do, but you're not willing to say it. And so my guess would be that being a person who thought about that and was willing to say something, he has probably had a very different trajectory than in an environment like it sounds like you have built than the next employee might have had in a totally different environment and not being someone who was thinking that way and willing to say something.
Right. Is that why you're saying he's the highest paid person on my team? I mean, is that what you're talking about? Yeah.
That's awesome.
He's been a huge game changer. We've always clicked on this idea of the next day and what the future looks like. So a lot of business owners don't, and rightfully so, you're worried about payroll that week, right? You're worried about getting these orders in on time. You get stuck into working. Basically, a lot of business owners just bought a job or they built a job for themselves. And it's something I was stuck in for 3 years. I've seen a lot of my buddies that are business owners or friends or customers or subcontractors in this same mode. And it's hard to get out of that, right? Because we can get so busy. Maybe we're making some money and we like the action, right? I still like the action. So it is a difficult transition to kind of go, well, what does next month look like? Or how about this? I went to a training seminar one time where the exercise was 5 years. We're going to look ahead 5 years. And that was mind blowing for me because number one, people don't talk about 5 years. They just don't, so we're kids and we go, well, I want to get married. I want to get a good job. I want to have some kids or not. Or we kind of have these overall arching goals. But when we have those goals, well, what do we got to do today to get a little bit closer to that? And then what does we have to be next year to get even closer, right? And just having this, it's really goal setting, a really effective, advanced goal setting technique to do that. And some people are more naturally inclined to that. This particular individual in the book, that story, is probably better at it than I am, right? He just has this outlook on life. He's got 4 kids now. At the time, I think he had 1. We both had 1. And so he's, as a father and provider for his family, these are thoughts that he has, and he pushed me to have the same thing, to have this kind of same trajectory of the future and make sure that it looks like we're winning. And what are we doing today to win tomorrow?
When you tell the story, and I think you sort of alluded to it, when you cut your first check and maybe even some subsequent checks for profit sharing, there were times when it sort of backfired, right? Like people were offended at the size of the check or something of that nature.
Yeah. Well, when you don't properly lay out a plan, or even if it's a bad plan, not properly laid out, because it could be a good plan that you didn't communicate about. I had a guy, he was on the plumbing team and he was a salesman estimator. And we announced, very vaguely this profit sharing plan. And it's one of my lessons about clarity. And it's also a huge lesson in leadership that I learned about is you have to repeat things and you have to be clear about them. And, you got to paint the whole picture, right? Because if you don't paint the whole picture and you paint half of it, people are going to fill in what they think the other half should look like. Naturally so, right? As human beings, that's what we do. And this particular team member just thought, and some people think this, I've learned this multiple times over my years. They just think the company has a money printer in the back room. It's probably in my office and it's just printing out $1,000 bills all day long. And the reality is, and most business owners listening are like, man, I wish Rob was right about this, but business is hard. And yeah, you can be successful, but success typically does not look like 7-digit numbers in a bank account every year, right? It's typically a lot of business owners, especially starting out, are just making wages, right? And that could be that case for years. And at this time we were doing profit sharing. That was, I was doing very well. I have no complaints about that, but I was not making millions or even $1 million, right? And I was trying to bridge that gap, right? And construction, which is what my first companies were, it takes money to make money. And even if the company was making, $500,000 a year, me personally, my personal income was much less than that because you need to keep money in the business for retained earnings and growth. You got to buy equipment, trucks, and have money to hire people to train them. There's all these things about running a business that your typical employee is not thinking about. And they just think that when they do a job for $1,000 and they make 30% on it, that $300 goes straight into the owner's back pocket, and then bam, he's off to vacation again or whatever else. And a lot of times it's not the case. So in this particular story, this guy thought we were making millions, and I don't know what he thought a profit sharing check was going to look like. And it was obviously very disappointing to him, even though he never gave it back, Eric. He still cashed it. But he just thought that it was really, really low and that he was insulted by it, even though at the time, for what he was getting paid on a salary, he probably couldn't have gotten a job making more anywhere else, right? So we were already at the top of the market for his pay and his position. And it caused some resentment. And about 6 months later, I think 6 to a year later, he eventually left the company because this resentment built up, right? And I, as a young leader at the time, didn't see it, didn't catch it, didn't communicate clearly enough to fix that resentment before it got too bad. But yeah, it can, if you're, it's weak leadership at the time that I had. I just thought I gave that guy $1,800 for, I've already paid him his salary. I think it was 3 months at the time. I'm guessing on that dollar amount. I'd have to go back and look because that would be interesting to remember like how I paid somebody an extra $1,800 or $1,500 and they actually quit over it eventually. And so that's when I talk about the clarity, being a leader, the reminders of what this program's for, and to really create that buy-in to the program and what it's supposed to do, what you can do, as opposed to what the company can do for you to help each other out. And that was probably a huge point in the early days that I missed on communicating or even thought it was that important. I was naive. If I give you more money, you're going to work harder. Not the case. Not the case for most people.
I love I think humility that you're expressing and also the responsibility that you're taking onto yourself because, we're all on various journeys, but I was just talking to someone else the other day. If I burn my hand on a hot stove in the moment, I just want to blame anyone but me for touching that stove. It's your fault because you left the stove on, or it's your fault because I turned the stove on, but then you said something to me, causing me to look away while I reached out my hand, or who knows what the specifics are.
Yeah.
But I hope that over time I'm becoming better at when I'm not in the heat of the moment, thinking, well, what am I responsible for here? And how can I have done better and all that? And I think that I don't know what percentage of human beings or adults more generally, Americans, who we can pick whatever group we want to go with. I don't know where most people start and then where they end up. I do certainly recognize in myself a journey, though, and I appreciate being exposed to a leader who isn't, I don't know, a martyr because there's just no other choice. And yet also can, as I think I'm hearing from you, look at things like this. Like there are lessons learned, and this is a growth opportunity. It's not just something bad happened and no lessons learned.
Right. I think what separates great leaders, because you can go to leadership training, right? You can read all the books and there's a lot of great books out there that I've learned a lot from. But bottom line, true leadership is the relationship, right? With the one-on-one person. It's Rob and Sally or Eric or Jeff or whoever it is that you have. And when you have that relationship with them, that accountability, that honesty, that's where the true leadership happens. My goal as a leader is that when I speak and the words that are coming out of my mouth, we all know, especially this day and age, they're just words, right? Just like we can get on social media and type whatever we want. But when those words have weight, that's the true leader, right? And actually I learned this in being a dad, right? Dads can say, I was wrong. I made a mistake here. And so can owners, so can bosses, and so can spouses. And like you were saying, as a group of Americans or people, whatever group you want to pick, if we can go through that and understand the accountability and have that integrity, you create weight in your words, right? And how powerful is that when I walk into a conference room, 10 of my leaders or my construction department or plumbers or car washers or whatever I'm doing, and I'm trying to move a needle somewhere, I found much more success moving that needle when I have the relationships and the trust and the weight of those words.
One of the things that stuck out to me in your book was I'm not sure if it was a statement that you made or exactly how it came across, but I highlighted this, and knowing that we were going to talk, I wanted to ask you about it. I think you said somewhere that generally you're not in support of sales commissions. And then so I was wondering how you, on average, set up your compensation agreements with your salespeople such that maybe are they taking still lower base pay, but then there's bigger profit sharing, or what does that look like generally?
Yeah. So great question. I get asked this one a lot. Um, and the story I like to tell, I've never been in the car dealership business, but I've bought my fair share of cars and fleet trucks over the years and dealt with commission salespeople a lot, especially in the product industry. We're buying a bunch of lumber or we're buying a bunch of soap. And so these people are mostly commission based. And what I've seen, my experience has been almost every single time is these lone warriors out there that are not communicating well with their team, right? They're not, think about you pull into a car lot and there's guys standing on both sides of the driveway and a guy standing on the curb in front of the building. And it's like a mad fest of who gets to your door first to shake your hand first to claim their territory on getting that sell, that possible sell goes. And I often wonder, what's it like in the break room when these guys are all clocking in or eating their lunch throughout the day? What kind of culture is happening inside this room? And then you have a manager that's supposed to manage them, their schedules, who's taking days off, what shifts they do get or don't get. The weekend shifts, I'm assuming, are more lucrative for car salespeople. People have time to go down to the dealerships and buy cars. And I just, it's not a, to me, it doesn't feel like a productive, happy place, right? And I've never paid a sales commission for any of my companies. My thought is, to answer your question, is a competitive salary for that role. And because I can tell you a lot of interviews I've been in with salespeople or estimators, project managers, we have a combo role type here, the way we're structured. Well, they'll be like, okay, so if I bring in $100,000 job and we make more than, 40% or whatever the metrics are, you're not going to give me, 5% of that, right? And I'm like, no, I'm not, because you're going to treat the superintendent like garbage if he makes a mistake. You're not going to work well with anyone else here because this is a team collective effort, right? And then what happens is people start marking down their jobs just to sell it. And then when the job doesn't make money because they underestimated it on purpose to get it, whose fault is that, right? So then you have a superintendent or the field foreman at odds with your estimator / salesperson in that role. So those are the things that I don't like. Like when we sit into a room, every Tuesday, we did them this morning, we do production meetings, and I have my restoration company in there for an hour and I have my construction department in there for an hour. And we go through every single job in front of the whole team, right? And we have our profit percentages up. We have, all the information for that job. And it's kind of like a 30,000 foot flyover on the project. And we're looking for the low profit percentages, right? Human brains always go to the negative. What happened here? What mistakes were made? Was it underestimated? Did we make a mistake in the field? Did we, all these things. And then we look at the stuff that's above average profit. Well, how did we do that? What was this is a huge win. Can we do this again? Is this a repeatable process, and doubling down on the wins in front of the whole team? And I have a whole theory to this. When you have, let's say you have 4 estimators, right? Project managers that are out there selling work and lining up for your superintendent to handle. If one estimator makes a mistake and no one knows about it except the boss and that one estimator, how do the other 3 learn from that? How does the team get better as a whole if we're hiding our mistakes or not communicating about it in front of the whole team? Or the flip side, what if you got an estimator out there that's making 45% on all his concrete jobs? Okay. And we do a lot of concrete. And the other estimators are making 30%. They're struggling with this, right? Well, what does this guy know or doing different that we can all learn from to win more on these projects? So I want a team environment, right? Tom Brady won 7 Super Bowls. most guys that like football and watch football every weekend can't name one offensive lineman on any of those teams, right? We all give Tom Brady the credit. We know the coach and we know the quarterback. But what about all those other players that helped Tom Brady win? They're champions too, right? It takes a team to win. And in business, you need a team to win, right? Otherwise, you just own a job if you're a one-man show, or if you have any kind of goals to get bigger and to scale something of reasonable size to handle. There's a lot of reasons to not be a one-man show. There also is a lot of reasons to be a one-man show. There's plus and negatives to both sides of that world, but you need a team working together, not a team that's worried about credit or commissions or at each other's throat, fighting over customers, fighting over territories, or fighting over projects. That I just don't see ever working out.
What would you say to a founder or a CFO or someone who they have typical challenges in their business, normal sales, culture, whatever else? Maybe they approached you about profit sharing. Maybe they didn't. You're speaking at a conference. What's your elevator pitch or your hook or, the one thing, if you take one thing from this, this is what you want them to know so that they start themselves down this journey?
I would ask them a question and I would say, if your team thought, cared, and worked like you did on this business, what would that change for you every day? And you're going to get a lot of answers there. But all those answers that they give you is their reason why they should have a profit sharing program. Because that's the gap that it bridges.
I've worked a lot with founders and in particular in the startup space and, plenty of startups of any kind, technology, trades, whatever, plenty of them by one metric or definition or another don't necessarily go anywhere. And I'm kind of using air quotes around go anywhere. Whether you run your business for 15 years and you just keep bumping into a ceiling of 3 people or 10 people or whatever, and then you're not able to sell. And so you kind of just liquidate the business when you decide I want to move on, retire or whatever, or plenty of tech startups, they have whatever funding they need, friends and family or bootstrap, and, they never get traction. But regardless of where you come from, what kind of business you're in, I think a lot of founders in particular, but also middle managers and other people certainly end up in this place where they're questioning, why do I have to do everything? Am I the only one who thinks around here? My employees are a bunch of children, any number of things. And I often think to myself, much like what you said a couple of minutes ago, that yes, it takes two to tango, or however you want to describe it. And culture is a real thing. It's not just one person that defines culture and all that. But there are so many people who really do desire to have teammates with them and to have others that you really feel like they're rowing equally as hard as you and that they're bought in. And yet there's sort of like a veil between that dream and then the ability to plan or the visibility to there actually needs to be a plan. And I think you were kind of talking about that as well. These ideas of, well, maybe I'm going to get married or have kids, but how are you going to get there? What are the steps? Because you got to start doing the work. Otherwise, it all remains a dream. And the current reality remains just as much of a pain today as it was yesterday.
Yeah, correct. So I have two thoughts on that. Profit sharing, for one, we've talked about this. I got a whole book you can buy on Amazon for $10, right? But one thing I see that you talked about these businesses that don't go anywhere, right? They reach or how about they reach a certain level of success and then they kind of just seem to stop and then they'll stay there for a while. And what I'll see is they lose interest, and then they'll kind of get distracted, and the whole thing kind of unfolds or unravels in one way or another, right? What I would like to see more for business owners or leaders, C-level type leaders, mid-level managers, anyone that wants to excel in whatever role that they're at in leadership, is this pursuit of self-education, right? We are not reading enough as a society to help ourselves. And I can't tell you the value that I've gotten from a $30 or $10 book on Amazon. I actually just listened today. I have 8 children, Eric. I've been a dad for almost 18 years. Just today, just for the fun, I was cruising through Audible, and there's a book that popped up as a sponsor. It's called by James Patterson. It's like how to be the number one dad. And it's 1 hour, something like that. Number one dad, and it's 1 hour. And I just, it was 1 credit on my Audible account. So I'm like, I'm just going to listen to this. And it was really simple, but I learned something there. Like, my oldest son turns 18 next month. And I learned like 2 or 3 things that I thought, I'm going to do that tonight, right? I'm going to do this with my daughter. That was a good idea for this son. And it took me, I listened to it on my way home from work yesterday. I listened to it on the way into work today, and I finished it during my lunchtime checking on a job site. And I'm going to be a better dad today than I was 12 hours ago. And I think in society and leadership, no matter, even if you're a minimum wage worker, somebody else, you can learn these things to deal with your parents, friends, your future spouse, your dating. There's a whole, I didn't want to get into dating. I haven't dated in a long time, thank God. But there's all these things about relationships that we can do to improve ourselves. And we just don't go after it enough. We don't know it's out there, but there's amazing authors, amazing stories out there that people are sharing real life experiences. And part of me writing that book, what really motivated to write this book was, if I had this book 15 years ago, how much time and heartache would have this saved me? If there's one business owner that buys this book and actually learns something from it, because of just from what I've learned from all the authors and business leaders that I've read about, if I can just pass that torch a little bit to somebody else, that's a pretty cool feeling. And why not, right? We're on this planet for a short period of time. If we could leave something to help someone else out, that's, as a human being, that always feels good. I don't care who you are. It feels good to help others. And so many people have helped me. These people don't even know who I am, but I've read their books and I pick up little things here and there. And I get way more out of reading a book than cruising Instagram or TikTok or screwing around on something that doesn't help my family, doesn't help my children, and doesn't help my team member. So people should be reading. I think leaders are readers. Good leaders are readers.
I totally agree with you. And I realize that there's some confirmation bias here because I read a ton. I think I looked at Goodreads yesterday or today, and I've read 94, 95 books this year, a mix of audio, ebook, paper. I make a lot of notes though, which does differentiate me from some folks that, it's like in one ear and out the other. But
Right.
there are things like, I forget the studies, but there have been studies that people who read more fiction tend to be more empathetic, because in fiction, you get exposed to the character's inner world. And so you just get more practice than, for when you go out into the real world and your spouse or that guy in the other car who's honking at you or whatever, you get a little bit of practice with thinking, well, what might that person be thinking? What might they be going through? Now, I don't know at the moment off the top of my head how much more success you might have with empathy. But I find that really motivating. And then also, I mentioned culture at one point. The culture is a process of social learning. Social or society is just a group of people. And so if I touch that hot stove, well, then when I tell you, hey, if a stove is hot and you touch it, you might get burnt like this, and I don't have a burn on my hand here, but let's just imagine that I did. Well, suddenly you don't have to experience it in order to have that knowledge. And now it's my wisdom because I've experienced it and it's your knowledge, but those are simple things to pass down, just like 1 + 1 = 2. You, you don't have to experience a lot in order to know it. And think of all of the lessons out there, and you've, passed on a few of them. We are close to time. So I wanted to so that I don't rush us wrapping up here. I wanted to ask you about one thing. You Two things actually. So I think you race cars. Is that right?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I think I also saw maybe a month ago or so, it looked like it was at a race, but do you have a business that does some service or support at events? Like, was it porta potties or Santa cans or something of
Oh,
that
no,
nature?
it's fun. Okay, so the racing, so my father raced when I was a kid, and I grew up and going to the races. My mom would take us and we'd watch my dad, my uncle. I had uncles on both sides of the family that did it. It's a hobby, right? It's like basket weaving, but way cooler than basket weaving, in my opinion, right? And they would drag these cars out of the junkyards and put roll cages in them and then drag them to the track and race on a dirt circle. And as a kid, the noise, the horsepower, the crashes, right? These guys were like celebrities, right? They were Superman and Spider-Man, and it was just so cool. And then so it's a family hobby. My son does it, my daughter does it. I've actually built a race car with 4 seats in it to give other people rides and my kids rides. I'm trying to get my wife in there. My wife has raced a car before. And so she's done it too. And so it's kind of our family hobby that my father got us into. And the rumor is his dad did it, although we don't have any proof. So my son would be a 4th generation racer, which is kind of cool. And I posted a picture at a racetrack of the porta potties because there was a 2-day event where a lot of guys would camp out. We race on Friday night and then we camp out and then race again Saturday night and go home. And I was talking about how important it was to clean the porta potties out for a 2-day event like that. But it's funny that you mentioned that because I've always looked into the porta potty business. Ever since COVID, you know, job sites would have a porta potty on them all day long. But since COVID now there's a sink, right? So people can wash their hands. We became much more aware of washing our hands all the time. And then a lot of times I'll see more sinks at job sites than toilets because they're putting them throughout the job site so guys can wash their hands more often. I don't know how prevalent that is now, 5 years post-COVID, but it's always been. And then one of my companies is a plumbing company, right? So, the number 2 rules of being a plumber is paydays on Friday and don't bite your fingernails. So I feel like I'm already close in the sanitation game anyway as a plumber, that providing toilets and having the tanker trucks and all that stuff would be a natural fit that we could do. But I don't currently own or part of that business. The other thing that interests me about that business is kind of the monthly reoccurring revenue. Someone needs 2 toilets at a job site for a year. You build them every month. My car wash has a monthly subscription model that does really well. So I kind of like that reoccurring revenue type businesses that I've dabbled in, and I look in those spaces sometimes. But yeah, so that's our family hobby. No one really asked me about that, but it's my escape. When that helmet goes on and that green flag drops, I can hyper focus on driving the car, right? I'm not thinking about anything else in life or work or stress and it's a cool thing to share with my kids and to do it with my dad. Something I super enjoy, and the whole family enjoys it. My mom's goes out there and it's just fun. It's a lot of fun.
I recall seeing, I think it must have been that post you were talking about on Instagram, and it was something like you or your uncle or somebody said to maybe one of your kids, do you smell that? And then you put like a little sick face emoji or whatever. And then whoever it was said, it smells like money. And one, it was funny, but also you reminded me of a friend of mine who is a lifelong entrepreneur. He said something to his kid, and I'm going to forget some of the details, but the story ended with um, entrepreneurship is like scooping dog poop. That, you know, some days it's important enough that that person will pay you $1,000 to scoop that one pile of poop because they need it gone. And other days you just have a lot of poop on your hands and nobody is around to take care of it. And yet, you still have to, nobody's around to pay you. And yet, you still have to take care of it.
Entrepreneurship is about finding a need and doing it. Really, that's what business is in all cases, whether someone's toilet's not working or they need their porta potty cleaned out or a new deck. There's a need, and it's our jobs to service them, fulfill them. And the better we are leading our teams with relationships, I think the more successful you're going to be doing whatever it is.
Rob, I appreciate you being here. I want to ask you two things as we wrap up. And actually, I'll make a statement first. I would love to hear you present somewhere. You mentioned, I think, speaking or whatever. I think that you have so much more to say. And, whether you write the next book or I catch more podcasts that you're on, I think that the information that you presented in your book and also just your presentation causes me to want to hear a lot more. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Maybe you'll do your own podcast someday if you don't already have one. So now the questions. Where should people go to connect with you or look into your book or anything else? And then do you have any parting words of wisdom or things that people should check out or think about?
Yeah. So most people, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram, Rob Gallaher. I'm hanging out there, posting about my kids and racing and work stuff here and there too. The book is on Amazon. It's called Profit Sharing: The Power of Shared Success. And then our website, which is, believe, done. I think there's some little final tweaks on there, is called profitx.co. And we should have some. So by the time this airs, that will be all fully operational. But with the book goes over the story of profit sharing, the 10 rules. And then I realized it wasn't enough. Like, I don't feel like you can put everything in a book in efficient ways, because most business leaders, I know for myself, I don't want to read a 6-hour long book about how to do sales, right? There's a lot of these books have a lot of fluff in them. And I like the books. I'm going to name drop somebody right here because I think he's a great example of it. And I don't know how many pages his book is or how many hours it is to read, but Dan Martell just came out with a book called Buy Back Your Time. And I mentioned that book, and I love that book because he just tells you what to do and why. And there's not a lot of fluff and theory. It's nuts and bolts, right? And I wanted my book to be like that, where there's enough stories in there for the why, but then the nuts and bolts to get it done. I'm a mechanical person. All my companies have a lot of nuts and bolts and levers and switches in it. And that's just how my brain works. I tend to enjoy math too. I'm one of those weirdos. But that's so because of that idea, we developed a course online that business owners can buy. It's 27 videos, and it goes through all the things you need to do profit sharing. It goes through the rules. I have example launch speeches in there, the spreadsheets that we use, all the nuts and bolts, right? Exactly how to do this. And I keep thinking back to me in 2014, what I needed to do profit sharing and how much more money could I have made and how much money could I have saved, knowing what I know now, and some of the good team members that I've lost because of how poorly it happened in the beginning. If they would still be here being part of the winning formula. So all that is in a course out there on profitx.co. And parting words to any I think about the new business leaders, the new business owners, there are people thinking about doing it. Become a reader. Leaders are readers, and don't, there's never a perfect time, right? This was me, right? Oh, one day I'm going to have a business. My perfect time was shoved down my throat by a recession and a job loss, right? And I think by reading and going out there and reading about leadership and reading about your field and just learning about what you learn, whatever you're going to be doing, right? So if you're going to be a tech guy, how many videos on YouTube about programming are there that you can be absorbing instead of movies and social media? There's all these things that we can do. The amount of it, I tell my kids this. My son wants to be a welder, and he has his hobbies. He likes to fish too, and he races cars with us too. I'm like, you could watch YouTube videos on welding. There's a lot of welders out there explaining all this cool stuff. Absorb that. You will learn things, and you'll become a better welder for it one day. So the free information that's out there is incredible. I didn't have that when I was his age. We need to use that stuff. If you truly, truly want this life, and if you feel called to do it, you have to have this relentless pursuit of self-education. Trade schools are great. Do I think you need to go to college to get a master in business administration to be a business owner? Absolutely not. There are $30 books out there that can teach you just as much stuff, and do it for a couple years. You'll know way more than those people know anyway. The experience is invaluable, and I wish everyone the best.
Thank you. And that's awesome. I completely agree with you. So there is so much more that I would like to ask you, but for today, we'll leave it there. So thank you, Rob, for joining me. I'll have links in the show notes, and I hope that anyone who listens to this looks you up.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric. That was fun.